We're good. The conference is being recorded. We have Virginia Thornthwaite here, and we have Scooter and Brandon, and I know you guys have lots of questions for her, so go ahead.
And you have...
And
Cindy are here, too.
And Ann and Cindy and Nancy.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Miss Virginia. It's an honor for us to be able to talk with you today. The reason Scooter and I wanted to chat with you for a few minutes, we don't want to take up too much of your time, is because we've been working on I guess, kind of the brand of our company, of CSI Sport and Development. We've been kind of thinking through that, myself and Scooter and of course, a lot of the staff across the country at this point. We're trying to understand kind of who we are as a company and how do we explain that to people, and also kind of where we're going. And that's kind of a big conversation across the whole country, really. The particular piece that Scooter and I have been working on particularly is we've been using as a reference some books on branding. One of them, a very popular book called Primal Branding. I know this is maybe a little too much background, but one of the big questions that come up when we think about who we are as a company is how we started, and how did we begin, and how did we get here, and what is our kind of creation story? How did we get created? Certainly we understand, Scooter and I understand a lot of the basics when it comes to, Fred and Virginia Thornthwaite are, fearless and ambitious leaders and started the dairy co-op and moved on to optical and credit unions and eventually went into housing, and, many years later here we are today with, 54, 55 buildings across the country and thousands of members. So we understand, I guess, the basic framework, but we were hoping to get from you, if you're interested, is if we kind of understand, how did you start? What were the things that you believe that took kind of just a passionate young couple and, decided to start a co-op and start moving in that direction? What were the reasons that started, and kind of how did that story start out? So we're trying to understand the very, very beginning, back with you and Fred. So that's kind of really what our main question was. I thought I'd just kind of give you an opportunity if you just could kind of tell us the story, or if you want kind of more specific questions, whatever you'd like. But if you have a story you'd like to tell, we'd love to hear it.
Oh. Well, I thought maybe that you were just interested in the Essex Co-op and how we got started in Maryland. But you want to know the whole thing, huh?
1945.
Yes, ma'am. If you can go back to 1945 for us, we'd love to hear it.
Well, let's go back to the 30s first.
Yes,
okay.
You're right. Well, the co-op, Fred was a chemical engineer, and he worked at Park Davis. But in the early 30s, he got really concerned because of the Depression. He witnessed oranges being at the Woodward Avenue, and they would pour kerosene on them to keep people from eating them. And so times were really bad.
Why did they pour kerosene on them to stop people?
So people wouldn't eat them, because nobody had money to buy them, and they weren't going to give them away.
So rather than give them to people, they would destroy them.
Right.
Wow.
So anyhow, he started going around to meetings and reading and trying to figure out a better way for the economic system to work. About 1937 or so, he went to law school at night, and he took accounting. So, because a chemical engineer,
different line of business.
all he did was pills. And so somebody told him about a lecture by Professor McFarland at Wayne State, and he was doing a review of a book called Sweden, the Middle Way by Marquis Childs, and it described how the cooperatives work and the impact on the economy. And you will find even today that's true. And in Denmark, like they say, Denmark, and also there's a state of Kerala in India where cooperatives are strong. The people are happier, but their income is not, they don't have a few people with all the money and the rest of the people with not very much. So anyhow, Fred immediately decided that cooperatives were the way that he was going to, that's what he was going to work for. And Fred was the kind of person that if something was the right thing to do, that's what he did. And,
right.
you know, nothing else. I mean, he didn't deviate. So he eventually found David Sonnquist, and he and Dave started the Eastern Michigan Association of Cooperatives, and they had little study groups. Study groups were very important. They even had a syllabus. They had one on cooperative housing and one on cooperative education, and they had one on thrift skills because credit unions weren't quite that prolific in those days. So then they had the Eastern Michigan Association of Cooperatives, and then Fred he quit Part Davis. Well, before he quit, he organized a very successful credit union there called PARTA. But they've changed the name and moved to Ann Arbor, but it's still going. Let's see now, where are we? Fred basically quit Part Davis to volunteer in the cooperatives, but he worked for a year as the manager of the Joy Road, the co-op on Joy Road in Detroit, and worked his head off. He'd go to the Eastern Market early in the morning and get produce, and they did all kinds of things. But, I'm sorry, he felt that the co-op should provide service at as low a price as possible, and also should be a way of accumulating capital, because you really can't do much without capital.
Right.
So at that time, there was a lot of talk in the newspapers about the price of milk, and so they had a little study group about milk at the co-op on Joy Road, and for some reason the name is gone, but it'll come back. And Patrick Pollard, a wonderful man who was a Twin Pines milkman. Twin Pines was owned by the drivers. Do any of you ever remember that?
Oh, Twin Pines was huge.
It was huge. Well,
He's a clown.
so, excuse me, Pat said, get a milk crowd. And so in February of 1942, 12 people put up $20. That was $240, and they made a down payment on Johnny Wood's milk route because he was going off to war. And so, and then Fred left also. He went to Maryland, by the way.
Yeah.
College Park, as a matter of fact.
Hey, that's who we graduated from.
Yeah. Well, he was in a CPS unit, and you all probably never heard of that. That civilian public service. But he'd done other things, like before he left, he had a study group in Briggs Local on housing, and the group was supposed to be saving their money. Well, that's a side story, but Fred's interest in commitment to housing really went way back. But that was the cooperative homesteads, and it was at 14 Mile and John R., right beside the two buildings we have there. However, in about 1998 or so, for various reasons, the people sold out to a developer, and it's now, what's that thing? That big, it's a Walmart, okay?
Not Myers?
No,
Sam's?
there's a Walmart there. At least that's what Fred Wood said.
Okay.
I didn't go back.
Still look?
No, but the milk route in the meantime was taken care of by the volunteer members, and they somehow would mail Fred the information. He was doing the bookkeeping, and there's some pretty funny letters from the members. Like one of them said, the treasurer, she said, "I can't find where there's any insurance on the truck," and there probably wasn't. In addition, of course, they had not incorporated. But by October or so of 1945, they had accumulated $5,000, and the board told Fred that he was to go out and buy a dairy, and that's kind of, even in those days, yeah. So the only dairy for sale at that price was the Wyandotte Dairy, and we didn't have any members out there at all, but and we hired Antioch students. Oh, Fred had also, they had organized a co-op house on East Boston in Detroit. I think it was the first integrated housing in Detroit. This is in, probably 38 or 39. And so, anyhow, the Antioch student came in December of 45. They took over that unbelievable, that milk processing plant and a milk route and a store. And the Antioch student was working in the store. Well, this is too much detail, okay? But
This is great
This
detail.
is wonderful. Take your time.
Wonderful detail.
really,
Yeah.
well, there was a farmers milk. There was a Michigan Milk Producers Association that most farmers sold their milk through, but not the co-op dairy. So so we had milk and nobody else did. So in December when we opened, and Constance Burden was the Antioch student, running the milk store, and she told everybody the great news about the co-op. And there were people like George and Nellie Southard who moved into the Wyandotte Co-op. They had actually been members of the co-op in Manchester, England, and people responded. We finally got a board of directors, but that was another thing. The co-op was structured to operate in districts, and they made a mistake in the bylaws. They called the board of directors. That was wrong because there's only one board. So the Wyandotte group, Fred realized pretty soon that the milk plant just, it was costing 4 cents a quart to operate, where the big dairies were doing it for a penny a quart. And it just was not feasible. But it was great milk. The fellas, our employees, you see, in about, Fred only had 3 or 4 weeks time to recruit people to run the plant and to start doing the milk rods. And a lot of them came from, they were conscientious objectors who believed that we should really have an economy that served people and was not based on war and would not result in war. And so we had our milkmen they were college graduates, and they were really interesting people. And also, though, they were not exactly ornery, but they all had minds of their own.
Mm-hmm.
And
Redwood.
Yeah, right. So I remember one meeting we had, and Fred wasn't too clear about how he was going to manage all this, and so he thought he'd just have the employees set their own wages. Well, Corey Naniga, one of the milkmen, he was making $500 a month. Fred was making $150. I was making $125, and Bill Kenner, who was doing the books, he was making $300. And I don't know what the fellas in the plant were making, but Corey was complaining, and Bill Kenner says, "Corey, you must have 3 wives and 4 concubines to need so much money."
$300 a month.
Anyhow.
Is $300 a lot back then?
What?
Is $300 a month a lot back then?
500 was a whole lot.
Wow.
And 300 was, okay. And I managed. I just was renting a room.
Remember, this was not long after Ford was paying. How much was it? $5 a day?
Yeah, well, that was back in the 20s.
In the 20s, so they probably weren't paying that much more then. So.
No, they weren't. And I know that the wages in the milk store were 75 cents an hour, but we increased them. and students mostly worked for us in the store, and they were great employees. Even, I remember a 15-year-old who was one of the very best. But anyhow, the milk plant, oh, man. Well, and so we had meetings every month, membership meetings, but we couldn't get a place to meet. We could meet at the Clark Street Y for Detroit meetings, and also at the Highland Park Y. But in Detroit, in Wyandotte, the YMCA would not let us meet in their place. And one night, this was before I actually came to work for the co-op, Professor McFarland was speaking, and a whole bunch of people came, and they were to go meet at the school, and they got there and the door was locked, and the school board had said they cannot meet in the school. So Reverend Fernschild took the group over to his church, which wasn't far away. So we ended up meeting mostly in Dompolsky Hall on Oak Street, and that was fine as long as people could make it past the bar down to the meeting room. And we always had, we hired two, I guess they were fiddlers, and we would do square dancing, and we always had recreation and a business meeting and food. Or
That hasn't changed. Yeah.
Well, yeah, except now I think you mostly have food.
Right.
Well, and we would sing. We always did some singing. And those monthly meetings were, we would do anything to try to attract people to come. I remember once we had a trained dog act. And Father Kern would come. He's a wonderful speaker. Have you ever heard of him?
I think I have.
He was at the Holy Trinity Church down in Cass. And he was a wonderful man. Fred had helped him. Fred had organized a house, a co-op house, basically for Skid Row bums, before he left for the war stuff. And so Father Kern knew the co-op. And also, some people in these early study groups, like Sidney Woolner, was the administrative aide to Senator Phil Hart, and Phil Hart was the one who got the Wyandotte building out for us, because I guess HUD just didn't understand the co-op at all.
They still don't.
Yeah, that ain't changed.
Yeah, and I think they thought Fred was some old farmer or something. I don't know what they thought. But, and Sidney Woolner was the administrative aide to Senator Hart. So he knew Fred. He understood what a co-op was. So that made it much easier. And then other people, Blanchard, James Blanchard, who became a governor, his administrative aide was the son of Ken Morris, one of the union officials. In fact, Blanchard, well, anyhow, this is getting too long. But finally,
Good.
Fred realized we had to discontinue the milk plant, and he arranged for the farmers to go to the Michigan milk producers, and he arranged jobs for all the employees, and the meeting where the decision was finally made was on a Sunday afternoon, and Bernard Keith was president of the co-op. And Bernard was, he had actually been a chemical engineer, but he had ended up during the Depression as a collector of small loans, which he hated, but he did a good job. So anyhow, he was president of the co-op at that time. And I remember he sat there with his hands jammed into this leather jacket. And we had on the blackboard 3 columns. One was the present operation of the dairy. One was to keep the dairy and we make whatever improvements people suggest, you know. And then the other was discontinuing it and buying milk from Jersey Creamery. And in addition, we had samples of milk. See, our milk was bottled. That is another story. But anyhow, and it was good milk, but they complained that milk in cartons would not taste as good. So we had a milk tasting thing, blind, you know, as part of this discussion. So at the end, it was quite clear that we really had to close the plant. Well, Mrs. Floyd Green was there, and she was one of the members, and she just burst into tears. She says that's like taking our baby. And I mean, it was hard. But, so, anyhow. And then, after that, Fred saw that we needed more volume, so, and he was still looking for ways to sell milk at a low price. So he started these outdoor milk vending machines, and oh, were they something else. People would drop their money in the snow, you know, and they put the wet money in the thing, and of course it'd stick, and we would get a trouble call. And I know when Warren was born in 57, on December 23rd, Fred got 65 calls on Christmas Day. So the manager had to do a lot of different things in those.
Yeah.
Dry
out the machine. Now, were these on street corners by themselves, or were they in front of businesses? Or?
He mostly put them at gas stations, and he picked very good locations. But I think the co-op may still own one piece of property that we had a milk vending machine on. But finally, we just had to give it up. So in 59, 2 failing co-ops, so to speak, merged. Cooperative Dairy Service and the Fordson Co-op from Dearborn. We had been having joint education meetings. We always had education meetings every month. And we got pretty good at square dancing. And, so the board hired Joel Welty to manage the store in Dearborn on West Warren, and he brought along the financial statement of the Akron Co-op I didn't mention it, but earlier, the unions after the war, along with the filing fund, put a whole lot of money into co-op supermarkets in Chicago, Detroit, Pontiac, Akron, I don't know where else. And and there's a meeting of Fred with the Victor Rooser and some of the other people, and Fred asked him, why don't you help the co-op dairy, you know? But anyhow, the unions lost tons of money, and I mean, local 600, I know, lost 100,000, and nobody ever lost any money in cooperative services. And local 22 loaned us 10,000 to buy more milk trucks, and of course we repaid them. But anyhow, it became pretty clear. Oh, when Fred saw the Akron Co-op financial statement, he'd always wondered why they hadn't folded too, because the Motor City Co-op failed, the Pontiac store failed, and they all failed. But Akron hadn't. When he saw the statement, he could see why. The store lost $50,000, but the optical made $50,000. So Fred says, we're going to start a co-op optical.
That's a smart move,
yeah,
right?
That's a good move.
Yeah, and of course we didn't have any money. And we had a fundraising meeting at the Dearborn Recreation Center. We had one meeting there, and I remember a fella came from, I guess he was a union man, and he looked around and he says, where's Ted Hogarth? He was the editor of one of their papers. Where's somebody else? He said, you don't have anybody here but people. So, anyhow, we managed to raise, between $15,000 and $20,000 to help start the optical. And Bernard Englander came, and he was the real one who made it possible, because he had the expertise, and he's actually an optician himself. So,
But what year was this, Virginia? Do you remember?
1960. We opened the office on Telegraph in April 1960. And at the same time, see, the 202 was originally not a part of HUD. It was, it was something else. It was under the same agency as hospital money and all that. And it was a very simple program. And the man who was in charge of it was just a wonderful fellow. And the concept was that it would be a revolving loan fund at market rate. And at that time, market rate was 3%, you know. So then it went to 3 5/8. That's why there were 2 loans on Wyandotte Co-op, because the interest rate went up, and they made it the second part a higher rate of interest. So anyhow, we applied, and the land that we bought on a sort of a land contract was on Oak and 3rd in Wyandotte, and it was sold to us by this man who owned a building here that had a bar, and the city wanted it the worst way for the post office, but he wouldn't sell to them because they he figured we'd help his bar. So, anyhow, so we got the architect was the same one that did the Ferndale building that was such a disaster in Detroit. And Fred never did like the plans, but anyhow, as soon as we got it paid for, boom, the city came over. They said, you can't build there. And and they said, but we have this other property over here that belonged to Mr. Nellis, a former mayor, and you can have that instead of that. We'll swap. And so, and you know, the post office was actually, that's another whole story. Somebody ought to investigate the post office finances. I mean, not get sidetracked.
Sounds like the city of Wyandotte hasn't changed much either.
Well, no, they were wonderful. They, we got that location, and then there wasn't enough parking, and so the co-op bought this house, you know, and actually Fred and I happened to own another house there that burned, and the city persuaded us. So we sold that to the co-op for not a whole lot of money. So that's part of their part. They've got 2 lots there. One was from us and one was had been owned. But anyhow, it was 1965 before we finally got that building built. And those poor people were meeting almost every month for, I would say they met for 4 years.
Wow.
And then they said, now hurry up. And HUD says, and get in your application for another building. And for Bishop, and the city was quite I left out a lot of stuff there. The city was quite supportive, and they sold us the site of the old city hall, and that's where Bishop is. And so that's, I think that's enough, don't y'all?
Yeah, that was excellent and
Tremendous.
You know, I think that what I've at least taken away from it is that it was really about economics and finding cheaper ways to provide services and serve members. Is that correct?
Yes, but also, Fred, I remember once Bernard says, Fred calls everybody boss, even the little kids. And with the co-op buildings, when we started them, we didn't have all these manuals, you know.
Anne's got a meeting. I have a conference call.
Of course.
So nice to see you again.
Good to see you, Anne. So he felt it was very important for members to understand the co-op and to be involved. That participation is very important.
Right.
And he was, and I think you all have done fine. I don't.
So when did Charlene Stork start working?
Charlene started probably in 1947, but she was working in the milk store just as a student. Actually, she used to come she and her little friend, they'd sort of play over there. And she worked see, the office, that was the other thing. The office was, that first office was in a milk plant, but it was hopeless because of so much moisture, you know. So it moved up to Fred's bedroom. And I was just amazed that men from the Wyandotte Savings Bank came up there and they loaned us money. And over the years, they would lend us money for optical equipment and everything. They were just great to deal with. And then Charlotte worked for the city of Wyandotte for a long time.
I remember Charlene Stork telling me a story that when she had first started, I think as a co-op student,
yeah,
that one of her jobs was to go into Fred's sock drawer and get the coins, that they were all in a sock or something in the drawer. And in this day and age, if you said to an employee, "I want you to come into my bedroom, go in my dresser drawers," oh my goodness, that wouldn't work.
Well, no.
But she said she didn't think anything of it.
I have one last question, if you don't mind. First of all, thank you so much for the time and for this incredible backstory for us to understand our company. And it's going to be amazing as we sit down and think through how do we explain this to people and get them on board with the co-op. And it sounds like there's a lot of things that really are exactly the same as they were before, which is great. One little detail question I have is just I understand how you got into housing with Wyandotte, but I don't understand exactly why you all decided to, I know why you went into the optical, but I don't know exactly why you went into the housing piece.
Oh, because housing is very important. And Fred had organized the co-op homesteads back in '38, and he'd also organized a co-op house on East Boston in Detroit, and to deal with HUD, the co-op board. Oh, he first proposed it in well, let's see, must have been the early 50s, right after they closed the plant, and he'd put together a way of financing it. It was a 4-unit thing in Wyandotte, because see, HUD wouldn't deal with you if you had some track record in housing. So
that hasn't changed.
Yeah. So anyhow, that didn't go through because the employees, the milkmen, really raised Cain. They said, we should make a go of one business before we try to get into housing or into another business. And so, and also, they got together and they, basically they tried to take over the board. And so the board changed the bylaws. Well, they, the members had to approve it to say that no employee could be on the board. And that's the reason that that's in the bylaws. Because, and then let's see what else about that. You asked me something else.
So at that time, he was really focused on basic necessities, food, shelter.
Right. That's right. Oh, well, so in '57, the co-op bought a 10-unit building in Detroit, and one of the members, Roger Bradley, found a 2-unit building on Central in Wyandotte. But that was a disaster. Fred and I personally had painted it and cleaned it up. And we got a family in there, and the man was awful. And some of the neighborhood women came and begged us to get him out. And then one day, about 6 o'clock in the morning, the phone rang. It was raining, and lightning had struck the house, and it burned. And so that got the man. Oh, we had tried to evict him, and Fred asked the fellow, how come you don't serve those papers? And the man said, well, he has this little baby and it's had an operation and he doesn't want to be responsible. But anyhow, the house was struck by lightning, and that took care of that. And our auditor said he wasn't going to mess with Fred.
He had God on his side.
He's going to get struck by lightning. But in order to, so then in 60, we also started managing separately owned family FCH housing co-ops. One in Royal Oak, one in St. Clair Shores.
That was in 1958?
No, 1960.
60.
And but they weren't much fun. They weren't nearly as nice because, well, it's just if they'd have been a part of the co-op, it would have been different. But they weren't, and they just sort of. But they were important to us because the president of the Woodward Heights Co-op was C. March Miller III, and Fred had gotten him involved in the NAHC, and so that he and he was a Republican. He was in charge of fundraising for the state of Michigan. So George Romney was made secretary of HUD, and he took March Miller to HUD with him. And March Miller is the one that got Trenton, Royal Oak, and LaBelle.
Okay. The 3236 building, section
Right.
236.
Right. But it just seemed as if we had to exert extraordinary force to get any place, even though they could see that the buildings were just fine.
What I hear from Detroit HUD now is, you guys are different, but you work. I don't know how it works. I don't know why it works, but it works.
Oh, I should say that the Maryland office was wonderful. Fred and I went there with the application for Essex, and our fellow in the office had not done a good job, and he hadn't added it properly. And the HUD person, instead of just kicking us out, he says, I can fix that. And he took some snow peg, and he rubbed it out, and he put it in his typewriter, and he corrected our application. Wasn't that something?
That is. Do you know the Maryland office is still a great office to deal with?
Isn't that when you wonder why, and what the difference is. Well, I think you've all probably passed out by now.
Guys, Scooter, Brandon, you have any other questions for Virginia? Well, you've got her here.
You know, I think we're good, and once again, we're really thankful for all that information. This is really good stuff that we can take back and put into our workshops and our education training and the like.
Well, I don't know about that.
Virginia, can you clarify one thing for me? When did we go from the dairy to a grocery store? Because didn't we go to the grocery store?
We merged with the Ferndale, the Fordson, but they were closed. Joel Welty closed it, actually. We only ran it about 10 months or so.
The grocery store?
In the Fordson Co-op. But we had groceries in the drive-in milk store.
Okay. And then also, what about co-op credit union?
Oh, well, that was started by the Fordson Co-op. I think about 56. Well, there's another tale there, but I don't know how to tell it.
Oh, come on, tell us.
Really?
Good one.
Well, when Joel Welty was at the co-op in 1960, we had these wonderful meetings with union presidents and the credit unions. We'd have big dinner meetings, and they were really enthusiastic about the co-op optical. And then the Credit Union League, and this really isn't very nice, the Michigan Credit Union League, you see, I don't know how it is now, but at that time, you had to have a common bond. So they got the idea, we will start co-op optical offices all over, and that will be the common bond for a new credit union. But for some reason they felt they had to get rid of Fred as manager of the co-op, and maybe take it over. So they had a slate of 4 people, and somehow Frank Brakefield went into the store one day. No, not the store, the credit union. And the credit union was handing out this information about what people they should vote for at the co-op services meeting, you know. And when Frank went in, they started to hand it to him. And the woman looked back, and Al Williams, the manager, was shaking his head, no, don't give it to Frank, you know. So they figured out what they were doing. And that was a very funny meeting. Actually, I might say it. That's the kind of meeting where when you have some conflict, you really up the attendance. And so people came, and I know this Antioch student came back just to vote, and Joel Welty stood at the door and handed out the slate, and my neighbors, they were from Alabama, a steel worker, and our cleaning lady, they were all there, and they had a little slate, and they were sitting at a table, and this man noticed that they weren't voting for the ones he had, so anyhow, they didn't get any place. But Frank, at the beginning of the meeting, he says, it's just wonderful. We have had so many new people join, you know, because the Credit Union League people had joined. With everybody who joined within the past 2 months, please stand up. And there was a groan around the room, and nobody stood up. But anyhow, that was interesting. And that they did start quite a good operational optical in Lansing, I think. But
Interesting. Co-op Optical is still up and running.
yes, but not very fast.
No, they've got a lot of competition. There are a lot of optical.
Not only that, they've lost their Chrysler contract.
Yeah.
See, we pioneered those optical benefits, and then Blue Cross stepped in and started doing it. So it just became meaningless. And in a way, the companies didn't care how much they paid for it. It's too bad.
That's one of the things that happens when you start something. You've got a great idea, and then there's always somebody behind you who's willing to take your idea, kick it up a notch, and run with it.
But I think you fellas should read some of the early co-op literature. There doesn't seem to be much around anymore.
Okay.
But co-ops are, there are a lot of little natural food co-ops, and there's a very good one in Sacramento, and Arcata, and Cambridge, Massachusetts. But it's not a movement, really.
We'll definitely look some of that up, and we found, I attended the Co-op Hall of Fame induction last week, and I learned a lot about different co-ops, credit unions, and food co-ops, energy co-ops, etc.
Oh, that's good.
Yes, ma'am. And
yes.
I just wanted to say we're actually working on a new project, and we have a meeting with a landowner today at 5.
Oh, you better go.
Yeah, I actually have to cut it a little bit short, but once again, I definitely appreciate all the information, and we'll be sure to get you a copy of our workshop when we get it finished, for just so you can look at it.
Okay. The co-op principles you should study.
Oh.
Could you put their names and address there?
Well, I can put their name there, but
Well, have a good meeting.
All right, you guys. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Virginia.
Well, you're welcome.
Okay. Bye now.
Bye-bye.